This lecture is about writing thesis statements. Each essay, research report, or personal narrative must have a clear, focused point to it that can be stated in a sentence or two. The most common problem is that students write thesis statements that are too vague. Thesis statements must be very specific. The more, the better. It is often helpful to speak aloud about the point that you want to make in the paper, either to yourself or to someone else, like your sibling or maybe your dog, and then write it down. You can refine it from there. Make sure that your thesis statement is an argument, an opinion. It must be arguable and not simply a fact. For example, if you wrote the following statement, Ronald Reagan was President of the United States in the 1980s, then you could not argue this because it is a fact. This is not a thesis statement. If you wrote Ronald Reagan was the best or worst person ever to serve as President of the United States, then you would have a thesis statement. There would be plenty of room for argument and to prove your point. The biggest mistake that students make is that they choose topics that lend themselves to merely presenting information about them. This might be okay sometimes, but for college, many of your papers that you will be asked to write must have a thesis statement that is arguable. A thesis statement is inherently an argument. This will be very clear to you after you read about and learn about the elements of argument. A thesis comes from the scientific activity of formulating a hypothesis. A hypothesis must be tested and proven to be true or false. Similar to scientific testing, an essay is a way to prove a thesis with evidence. Your evidence may come from all kinds of sources depending on the purpose of your essay. A serious research argument will use facts, statistics, case studies, research studies, surveys, and logic to prove the thesis. An opinion piece might have a more persuasive thesis based on an emotional appeal, which could be used for a useful purpose, like raising money for earthquake victims, for example. A more casual, persuasive essay might also use intimate personal experience or humor for support. Also, thesis statements are statements, not questions. Never pose a question as a thesis statement. For example, if you wrote, "Should public schools use corporal punishment?" then you do not have a thesis statement. If you wrote, "Public schools should use corporal punishment," or "Public schools should not use corporal punishment," then you would have a thesis statement. One of the best ways to do a thesis statement, which almost always guarantees success, is to use Aristotle's logical word problem format, which is called a syllogism. It has three parts. A syllogism has a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. These give you a natural introduction, a body, and a conclusion by which to organize your essay. I have modified the syllogism for you. Use the following sentence structure and fill in the blanks to write your thesis. If, then, therefore. Again, this gives you a natural introduction with the if, the body with the then, and a conclusion with the therefore by which to organize your essay as well as your thesis statement. For example, if public schools use corporal punishment, then they would be returning to a barbarous era when the civil rights of students were not considered. Therefore, public schools need to adopt disciplinary measures that address the core psychological reasons that students misbehave.